Those who read this letter will be the most successful people today. I will be the one to provide you with knowledge, experience, and wealth. Most importantly, from this point forward, I will help you memorize the lessons of success in the shortest time possible. Share me with your friends so that together, we can become elite and build lasting wealth. If you understand this, the rest is simple. Financial success is not a hard science. It is a soft skill, where how you behave is far more important than what you know. In the grand, sweeping theater of the global economy, we often mistake the players for mathematicians and the markets for machines. Yet the true architect of every fortune and every ruin is the volatile, unpredictable human psyche. Imagine two lives unfolding in parallel, moving toward destinies that defy every rule of traditional logic. There is Ronald Reed, a humble man from a rural town, a janitor who spent his days sweeping floors and his afternoons repairing cars. He lived a life of quiet invisibility, dressed in worn denim, his hands calloused by labor. By all societal metrics, he was a man destined for financial insignificance. Yet, when he passed away at the age of 92, the world stood in stunned silence as it was revealed that this unassuming janitor had amassed a fortune of $8 million. He didn't win the lottery, he didn't stumble upon a secret inheritance. He simply practiced the silent, patient discipline of behavior over decades. Contrast this with Richard Fuscon, a titan of industry, a Harvard-educated executive at the pinnacle of high finance. Fuscon was a man who understood the intricate gears of Wall Street, yet his insatiable appetite for risk and the intoxicating perfume of his own ego led him to total ruin. During the 2008 crisis, he filed for bankruptcy, losing everything while the janitor's fortune continued to grow in the dark. The narrative of Reed and Fuscon teaches us that the world of money is the only field where a person with no formal education can outperform a genius from an Ivy League school. It is an arena where your psychological temperament acts as either your greatest ally or your most treacherous enemy. Most fail not because they lack the intelligence to calculate a return, but because they lack the emotional fortitude to endure a market crash or the humility to stop when they have enough. The analysis of these two lives reveals that the hidden engine of wealth is not alpha or leverage, but the ability to disconnect your self-worth from your net worth and to allow the passage of time to do the heavy lifting. We are conditioned to believe that money is a game of what, but it is irrevocably a game of who can stay calm when the world is screaming, and who can remain disciplined when the allure of instant gratification is at its peak. This journey through the mind moves into the murky waters of historical context and the myth of rationality. We often look at people making financial decisions, buying a lottery ticket with their last $20 or panic selling their retirement fund, and we call them crazy. But the narrative of the psychology of money argues that no one is truly crazy. Every individual makes decisions based on the unique lens of their own generation and the specific economic weather they endured in their formative years. Imagine a person born in 1950, entering adulthood during a period of skyrocketing inflation, versus someone born in 1970, who saw the stock market do nothing but go up during their 20s. These two individuals do not inhabit the same reality. They carry different financial scars and biological imperatives. When we see a low-income family spending hundreds on lottery tickets, we judge them from a pedestal of security, failing to realize that for them, those tickets represent the only tangible buy into a dream of escape that the rest of us take for granted. The lesson here is profound. We are all playing different games with different rules. The first step toward financial sanity is recognizing that your rationale is not the same as someone else's rationale. Success requires a deep, introspective audit of your own history to understand why you fear what you fear and why you crave what you crave. The narrative highlights that the goal of money is not to be smart in the eyes of others, but to be reasonable in the eyes of yourself. Being reasonable allows for the messiness of life. It accounts for the fact that you have a spouse who worries or a child who needs security. It is the transition from trying to be a cold, calculating machine to becoming a compassionate observer of your own humanity. When you accept that you are not a spreadsheet, you finally gain the power to design a life that actually fits your soul. As the narrative intensifies, it confronts the most dangerous trap in the human experience, the moving goalpost. The story recounts the tragic excesses of those who had everything, wealth beyond imagination, respect, and influence, yet risked it all because they lacked a sense of enough. We see the archetype of the high-stakes gambler, like Rajat Gupta or Bernie Madoff. Men who reached the summit of the mountain but were so blinded by social comparison that they tried to leap across a chasm to a peak that didn't exist. Social comparison is a ceiling that rises forever. It is a game that can only be won by refusing to play. The analysis of this hunger shows that the most difficult financial skill is getting the goalpost to stop moving. Happiness is simply results minus expectations. When your expectations grow faster than your income, you remain spiritually poor regardless of your bank balance. The pursuit of more without a definition of enough is a form of self-inflicted torture. True wealth, the narrative suggests, is the gap between your ego and your income. It is the silence of the things you chose not to buy. We often mistake rich for wealthy. Being rich is having a high current income. It is visible, loud, and often fragile. Being wealthy is what you don't see. It is the car not purchased, the jewelry left in the store, and the house that is smaller than you could afford. Wealth is the option value. It is the ability to wake up in the morning and say, I can do whatever I want today. The script emphasizes that the only way to accumulate wealth is to suppress your desire to show the world how much money you have. It is a psychological war against the biological urge for status. The person driving the Ferrari is often the person with the most debt and the least freedom. While the janitor with the hidden $8 million is the true king of his own time. This leads us to the silent, compounding magic of time. The story of Warren Buffett is often told as a tale of a genius stock picker. But the narrative reveals a different truth. Buffett's true power is that he started at age 10 and didn't stop for 80 years. Over 90% of his wealth was generated after his 65th birthday. He is not just an investor, he is a survivor. Compounding is like a forest fire that starts with a single spark. For a long time, nothing seems to be happening. And then, suddenly, the world is ablaze. Most people fail to build wealth because they interrupt the compounding process unnecessarily. They get bored, they get scared, or they get greedy. They look for the home run and strike out, failing to realize that a good enough return sustained for an extraordinarily long time will outperform a spectacular return that leads to a nervous breakdown. The lesson for the listener is to cultivate the patience of the oak. We live in a world of fast money and instant results. But the psychology of compounding requires a long-term temperament. You must be willing to be bored. You must be willing to look like a fool in the short term while the math of the universe works in your favor. This is the price of admission to the world of wealth. It is not a fee paid in dollars, but a fee paid in uncertainty, fear, and the ability to ignore the noise of the crowd. The narrative suggests that your greatest asset is not your brain, but your time horizon. If you can extend your vision beyond the next quarter or the next year, you move into a category of competition where very few people are playing. As the narrative flows into the concept of luck and risk, it challenges our arrogance. We are told that we are the masters of our fate. But the story of Bill Gates and his childhood friend Kent Evans reveals the hidden hand of the universe. Gates attended one of the few high schools in the world with a computer in 1968, a 1 in a million stroke of luck. Kent Evans was just as brilliant, just as ambitious, but he died in a mountaineering accident before graduating, a 1 in a million stroke of risk. One was propelled to the heights of history, the other was silenced. The analysis here demands a radical humility. When you succeed, acknowledge the luck. When you fail, acknowledge the risk. This perspective prevents you from becoming paralyzed by regret or blinded by hubris. It allows you to focus on the process rather than the outcome. By building a margin of safety into your life, you recognize that the world is a chaotic place where things you never imagined can and will go wrong. Your goal is not to be right all the time, but to be unexterminable. The narrative shifts from the external mechanics of wealth to the internal sanctity of independence. If you understand this, the rest is simple. The highest dividend the money pays is the ability to control your own time. The story follows the archetype of the golden handcuffed professional, an individual who earns a staggering income but possesses no sovereignty over their morning, their afternoon, or their evening. They are rich in currency but bankrupt in freedom. The analysis of this condition reveals a stinging psychological truth. Doing something you love on a schedule you can't control feels exactly like doing something you hate. The narrative portrays money not as a tool to buy stuff, but as a freedom fund, a shield against the whims of an erratic boss, the volatility of the economy, or the unforeseen emergencies of life. We encounter the man in the car paradox, a gripping look at our desperate need for status. Imagine a man driving a roaring red Ferrari down a crowded boulevard. He believes the world is admiring him, but the reality is far more hollow. The onlookers aren't looking at him, they are imagining themselves in the driver's seat. They have ignored the man entirely to worship the machine. This is the ultimate deception of luxury. The lesson learned is that humility, kindness, and empathy will bring you more respect than any horsepower ever could. Most people use money to signal to others that they are important, failing to realize that the very act of spending that money to show off is the fastest way to have less of it. Wealth, as the story continues to emphasize, is the options you haven't yet exercised. It is the power to say no to a job that's soul-crushing or yes to a moment that is life-changing. The narrative momentum builds as we enter the laboratory of forecasting and failure. We are introduced to the tail events, the extreme outliers that drive the majority of outcomes. In a world obsessed with averages, the story reveals that a tiny percentage of events, the 1% of days in the stock market or the 1% of decisions in a career, account for nearly all the results. This is the archetype of the patient strategist. You can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune if you ensure that your tails are profitable and your failures are contained. The analysis here is a liberation from the need for perfection. It suggests that your goal is not to have a perfect track record, but to stay in the game long enough for the positive outliers to find you. This requires a margin of safety, a psychological and financial buffer that accounts for the fact that the future will not look like the past. The story then tackles the seduced by pessimism trap. Pessimism sounds smarter, more sophisticated, and more urgent than optimism. If someone tells you the world is ending, we listen with rapt attention. If they tell you things will get better, we dismiss them as naive. The narrative portrays the historian's view: progress happens too slowly to notice, but setbacks happen too quickly to ignore. Because of this, we are biologically wired to overreact to bad news. The lesson is that rational optimism is the only sustainable path. It is the belief that the odds are in your favor, and that over time, the compounding of human ingenuity will outweigh the chaos of the moment. To grow wealthy, you must become a short-term realist and a long-term optimist, surviving the inevitable storms to enjoy the inevitable sunrise. The script moves into the concept of the price of admission. We often look at the success of others and think it was free, but every gain comes with a cost. The price of a higher returning portfolio is not a management fee, it is the fee of volatility, fear, and doubt. The narrative describes the individual who tries to avoid the fee by timing the market or jumping between trends, only to end up paying a much higher price in lost capital. The analysis suggests that you must treat market turbulence as a fee, not a fine. When you pay a fine, it means you did something wrong. When you pay a fee, it means you are paying for the right to a future reward. This shift in mindset transforms the anxiety of the investor into the resilience of the owner. As the continuous narrative flows, it touches upon the changing you. We are different people at age 20 than we are at age 40. The story follows the ghost of our future self, who often looks back at the rigid financial plans we made in our youth with regret. The lesson is to avoid financial extremes. Don't live like a monk today for a future that might never come, but don't blow your future on a whim today. The middle path, a moderate, flexible plan that allows for the room to change, is the only way to avoid the psychological pain of feeling trapped by your younger self's decisions. The script emphasizes that persistence is only possible if your plan is endurable. If it's too hard, you'll quit. If it's too easy, you won't get anywhere. The sweet spot is a lifestyle that you can maintain through both the feast and the famine. The narrative momentum intensifies as we reach the core of the invisible wealth. We see a world obsessed with richness, income, but starving for wealth, freedom. The story portrays the silent millionaire, The one who drives an old Toyota and lives in a modest house. Not because they are cheap, but because they value their quiet confidence more than the loud approval of strangers. The analysis reveals that the only way to save money is to kill your ego. Savings is the difference between your ego and your income. By lowering your cost of ego, you create a massive, permanent advantage over those who are trapped in the status arms race. Wealth is the unseen reserve that allows you to be the master of your own destiny. The final movement of Husserl's exploration leads us into the sanctuary of the reasonable man. If you understand this, the rest is simple. Don't aim to be coldly rational, aim to be humanly reasonable. The narrative follows the archetype of the mathematical investor, an individual who attempts to optimize every cent based on historical data, only to find themselves paralyzed when a black swan event, a war, a pandemic, or a sudden technological shift, shatters the models. In contrast, the reasonable man builds a plan that accounts for his own fallibility and the world's unpredictability. He accepts that his emotions are not a defect, but a feature of his biology. The analysis of this stage reveals the room for error, the most important part of any plan. It is the realization that the most dangerous part of a plan is the part you didn't see coming. By leaving a gap between what you think will happen and what can happen, you ensure that even when the world is wrong, you are still safe. The story reaches its climax by addressing the seduced by pessimism trap. Pessimism is intellectually seductive because it sounds like a warning, while optimism sounds like a sales pitch. The narrative portrays the doomsayer, the one who gains fame and attention by predicting the next great collapse. While they are occasionally right, they are strategically wrong. The history of the world is a history of slow progress and fast setbacks. Because we notice the setbacks immediately, we forget that human ingenuity is constantly compounding in the background. The lesson learned is that rational optimism is the only way to stay in the game long enough to win. It is the belief that the odds are in your favor, even if the short-term path is a jagged line of chaos. To be wealthy, you must survive the troughs of the present to enjoy the peaks of the future. The script moves toward its resolution by defining the end of history illusion. We are all under the delusion that the person we are today is the person we will be forever. The story follows the regretful planner, a 40-year-old man who is stuck in a career he chose at 18 because he felt he had to follow through on a long-term plan. The analysis reveals that sunk costs are the enemies of happiness. To master the psychology of money, you must give yourself the permission to change. A plan that is too rigid will break you, a plan that is flexible will grow with you. The narrative encourages the listener to avoid financial extremes. Don't sacrifice everything for the future, and don't blow everything on the present. The sweet spot is a balanced life that recognizes the future you might have different dreams than the present you. The core message Morgan Housel intends to convey is that wealth is a tool for autonomy, not a scorecard for vanity. The book is a manifesto for internal validation. It asserts that the greatest wealth is the ability to walk away from things that don't serve you. It is the quiet confidence of knowing you are okay, regardless of what the neighbors think or what the market does today. By mastering your ego, respecting the power of luck, and honoring the magic of time, you don't just get rich ban tro than chunyan kuik walk doi min. The psychology of money is ultimately the psychology of freedom. In the final reckoning, the story of money is the story of us. We are messy, emotional, and prone to error. But we are also capable of incredible discipline and foresight. The narrative ends with the protagonist, the listener, standing at the crossroads of their financial future. You no longer see money as a math problem to be solved, but as a behavioral challenge to be managed. The silence of your savings is the loudest statement of your strength. You are free, not because you have a Ferrari, but because you no longer need one to feel important. The goal of money is to reach a point where you stop thinking about money and start living your life.